Welcome to this workshop on the Recreational Dive Planner. My name is Fabio Buitrago. I'm the Course Director with ROATAN Dive Academy, and I'm going to be explaining and talking about the Recreational Dive Planner for the next half hour, 30 minutes. So to get into this topic, it is important to remember that this series of workshops are being done to use the time that we are locked down and we are in quarantine to refresh the knowledge, or for those of you interested in taking the Dive Master course or the instructor course, to learn how to do the proper calculations, in this case the dive planning, because it's not only part of the exam but it's something very useful as a professional that you need to apply to your work as a dive master or to teach your students as an instructor. So for getting started, please take a look on your Encyclopedia of Recreational Diving in pages 562 and 563. We have all the information on the Recreational Dive Planner that you are going to be using during this workshop. Also, there is another booklet that is very important, which is the instructions for the use of the Recreational Dive Planner. These instructions come with the Open Water Diver Crew Pack, and also you will find the electronic Recreational Dive Plan multi-level instructions within the Dive Master Crew Pack. For those of you willing to take the Dive Master course, when you buy your Crew Pack, you're going to have the instructions for the ERDPML within the Crew Pack. Okay, so let's get started with the workshop. I'm going to start talking about the components of this table, the Recreational Dive Planner. Okay, so you can see here we have two sections on this first side of the table. We have the information for the first dive, and then we have the information for the surface interval. On the second side of the table, we have two important sections. One is the information for the repetitive dive, can be the second or the third, and we have then all the rules, the special rules that apply to diving that you need to be aware of. Most of these rules are very useful to have during the exams, because you can answer the questions just reading what you have down here related to safety stop, decompression stops, flying after diving, diving at altitude, or many other special rules. Okay, so going back to the first side of the table, on the first dive section on the left hand side, we have at the upper lane on the first row, we have the depth. In this case, I'm working in feet, right? So what I have here is from 35 feet all the way to 140 feet. Okay, what I have below each of these depths is time. All these numbers that you see here are minutes, and the maximum time allowed to dive at each of these depths is the black box that you see at the very bottom of each of the columns for each of the depths, right? So just to give you an example, the maximum time that I can dive at 50 feet is going to be 80 minutes, because this is the black box under the 50 feet box or depth. On the left hand side, I have something which is very important, which is an alphabetic scale from A to Z, right? The closer I am to A, the less nitrogen that I have solved in my tissues. The closer that I am to Z, the more nitrogen that I have solved into my tissues. So when I dive, it doesn't matter the depth. As I go diving longer, as I stay longer on the water, I'm going to be descending on the alphabetic scale because I am intaking nitrogen. So this scale is just a relative subjective way of measuring how much nitrogen my tissues have when I am diving at a given time at a given depth. On the second side, when I finish a dive, I'm going to have a pressure group, right? It can be H, K, M, whatever pressure group. So I move now to the right hand side of the table, and here what I have is time intervals, right? So in each of these boxes, what I have is from a given time to another time. For example, 16 to 21 minutes, or 29 to 34 minutes, 12 to 16, right? So depending on the pressure group that I have at the end of the first dive, and the time that I spent out of the water at the surface, I'm going to get a new pressure group, because I'm going to be intaking nitrogen during the first dive, and I'm going to be eliminating nitrogen as I stay at the surface. So my pressure group is now going to reduce, is going to ascend back to A if I stay longer at the surface. Then on the second side of the table for the repetitive dive, I have the pressure group on top, which is the pressure group at the ends of the surface interval, and now I have the depth for the repetitive dive on the column on the left. So if I know the pressure group and I know the depth for the repetitive dive, I can just cross those two lanes and columns, the column for the pressure group and the lane for the depth, and I will find two numbers. One on the blue box and one on the white box. The number on the blue box is the maximum time allowed to dive at that depth given the pressure group that you ended the surface interval with. And the number on the white box is the residual nitrogen time. Remember, nitrogen is measured in minutes. So this number that I have on the white box means that I still have 29 minutes of nitrogen salts within my tissues from the previous dives that I haven't yet eliminated out of my body because I didn't stay that long at the surface. So I need to consider the amount of nitrogen that I have sold in my tissues to plan the repetitive dive. So let's apply all this information into some exercises so you get an idea of how the table can be used, and is very useful, right? So the first question would be, what is the maximum time I can dive at 60 feet? This is very important because in the case you're going to go diving and you want to learn how long can you dive at a given depth, this is what you're going to do. So in this case it's 60 feet, so I'm going to find on this row here 60, and then I'm going to descend until I find the black box. So in this case I have 55. Meaning that at 60 feet, the maximum time I can dive is 55 minutes. Okay, let's do another one similar to that one. What would be the maximum time that I can dive at 45 feet? So I have 35, I have 40, I do not have 45. So I'm going to round up to 50 to be more conservative. So 50, the maximum time I can dive is 80 minutes. Okay, so now I know how to find the maximum time I can spend on the water at a given depth. Okay, so also the recreational dive planner can be used for planning dives, and for planning the dives we need to know first what would be the depth and the time that we're going to be diving, or we're planning to go diving to. So for that, what I would like to do is just draw here a diving profile. So let's say this is the surface of the ocean, right, and this is my boat. I'm going to start diving, so I'm going to descend to a given depth that I'm going to write down on this lane here. Right, when I get to that depth, I'm going to stay at that depth for a given time that I'm going to write down in this lane here. When I finish diving that amount of time, I'm going to ascend back to the surface. Right, so this is a diving profile. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be diving that exact profile, but this is the maximum depth and the maximum time. Usually we go diving and we stay shallower, or we move slightly up, and we do not go below the maximum depth planned, but we stay usually shallower and we have some variation. But we're going to plan as if we were going to go the maximum depth that we're planning, and as if we're going to stay as long as we are planning. To be conservative, we know we're not going to get close to the limits. We're going to stay in a safer position, being shallower than the maximum depth planned and shorter time than the time planned. Okay, so let's do one exercise. And in this case, what I want to know is, what is my pressure group at the end of a dive to 53 feet for 39 minutes? So I'm going to write down the information here. So I have 53 feet and 39 minutes. Okay, so what I want to know is what will be the pressure group, the load of nitrogen at the end of this dive. So I'm going to grab the table and I'm going to just follow the information I have. So 53, I do not have 53, I'm going to round up to 60 to be conservative. So 60, and I'm going to descend trying to find 39, which is the time that we are planning to. So 60, 39, and I have a pressure group of P. And that pressure group, I'm going to write it right here when I come back to the surface as a letter P. Okay, so this is a very useful way to use the recreational dive planner to plan the dives. Okay, let's do one more, but in this case, we are going to include a surface interval. Okay, so for including a surface interval, we're going to stay at the surface for a given period of time. So the question is, what would be the pressure group of a diver that dives at 59 feet for 47 minutes and then stays at the surface for 37 minutes? So I'm going to write down the information here. We have 59 feet as the maximum depth, and then we have 47 minutes as the bottom time, the actual bottom time, and then I have at the surface 37 minutes. Okay, so what would be the pressure group at the end of the surface interval? So in this case, I'm going to follow the information, 59 feet, 47 minutes. So 59, I'm going to round up to 60, and then I'm going to descend looking for 47 minutes. And here I have 47 minutes. My pressure group is going to be S. So I'm going to write down letter S right there. And now, being letter S as a pressure group, I'm going to stay at the surface 37 minutes. So I'm going to follow this row until I find an interval that allows me or has contained the 37 minutes. So here I find 33 to 38. So the new pressure group is going to be K. Okay, so what is important about these exercises that we have done? At the surface, before starting a dive, we are going to be A, because we do not have that much nitrogen. We are in a saturation, in equilibrium with the ambient pressure, so we can assume at this moment we are A at the surface. We go diving, so when we dive, we know because of the Henry's principle that we described in the previous workshops that we are going to absorb nitrogen because the partial pressure of nitrogen is going to increase when we descend to depth, right? So we intake nitrogen. So now my pressure group has moved from A down to S. Okay, so I was A. Now I made a dive and I went all the way down to S. As I stay at the surface 37 minutes, my pressure group is coming up again to K. It has not yet gotten back to A because I didn't stay that long at the surface. But I have reduced the load of nitrogen I have in my tissues by staying some time at the surface. Okay, so this is very useful to plan the following dives, the repetitive dives. So let's say, for example, that we are going to plan for 2 dives now. Okay, so we're going to have the first dive at 57 feet for 39 minutes and a surface interval of 42 minutes, and then I want to do a dive to 48 feet. What would be the maximum time I can dive on the second dive? So I'm going to draw here a second dive. Right, so now we have 2 dives, and I'm going to put all the information that we have. Okay, so 57 feet is the depth of the first dive, then 39 minutes is the time for the first dive, and then I have 42 minutes at the surface. And then I want to go diving to 48 feet. And I want to know what is the maximum time that I can dive on that second dive. Okay, so let's put that information into the recreational dive planner. So 57, 39, and then 42 minutes. Okay, so 57, I don't have 57, I'm going to round up to 60. Right, and I'm going to find 39 minutes descending on the column of 60. And now my pressure group is going to be P. So I'm going to write down letter P right there. Now, as we learned from the previous exercise, being P, I'm just going to move to the right and find the 42 minutes, which is what I am planning to spend at the surface. So in this case, here I have in this box from 39 to 45. So the new pressure group is going to be H. Okay, so now I have the information up to the surface interval. Now I am going to move to the second side of the table. And I know I am H at the end of the surface interval, and I want to do a dive to 48 feet. So H and 48, I'm going to round up to 50, so I'm going to cross H and 50, and I have two numbers. I have the number on the blue box, which is 52, and I have the number on the white box, which is 28. As we were saying, 52 in this case on the blue box is going to be the maximum time that I can dive at this depth following this profile. So this is the answer to my question. I could dive 52 minutes. But I still have 28 minutes of residual nitrogen. That at this moment, because of this question, we are not going to use this information, only the maximum time that I can spend on the second dive, which is also known as the adjusted no decompression limit. Okay, so let's do one more, but in this case, we are going to try to find the pressure group at the end of the second dive. So we can see how that kind of exercises are being done. So let's say we are going to make a dive to 44 feet for 38 minutes and then stay at the surface 52 minutes and do a second dive to 40 feet. What would be the maximum time allowed, and what would be the pressure group if they stay half of the time allowed on the second dive? So I'm going to put the information here. So we have 44 feet, and then we have 38 minutes on the first dive. Then we're going to stay 52 minutes at the surface and want to do a second dive to 40 feet. And we want to know what's the maximum time allowed and what would be the pressure group if I dive half of the time allowed. So I'm going to follow the recreational dive planner with all this information. So 44, I do not have 44, I'm going to move up to 50, so 50, and I'm going to descend trying to find 38 minutes. I have 36 and I have 39, so I'm going to round up to 39 to be conservative. So my pressure group is going to be L, letter L. So being L, I'm going to stay at the surface for 52 minutes. So I'm going to just follow this lane all the way to the right, and here I have from 51 to 59. So my new pressure group is going to be D. And you can see now what we were talking before. I was A at the beginning of the dive. I dive, so I descend to L, and I stay at the surface, so I come back up. Not to A, not all the way to A, but I have come very close to letter D. So now I have the pressure group at the end of the surface interval, which is letter D. And I am planning to do a dive to 40 feet. So what would be the maximum time allowed at 40 feet being letter D? So it's 115 minutes. So the maximum time allowed for this second dive would be 115 minutes. But it says, what would be the pressure group? This is the first half of the answer. What is the maximum time allowed? But it says, if the diver stays half of the time allowed, what would be the pressure group at the end of the second dive? So half of 115 would be 50 and 7.5, 50, let's say 58 minutes. Okay, so instead of diving 115, we're going to dive 58 minutes. So what we had as letter D and 40 feet was 115 as the adjusted no decompression limit, and we have 25 minutes of residual nitrogen time. So this 25 is the nitrogen that I still have in my tissues from the first dive that I haven't yet finished eliminating because I didn't stay that long at the surface. It could be also understood as I'm still, I should have stood at the surface for 25 more minutes to finish eliminating the nitrogen. But as I didn't finish eliminating the nitrogen, I still have this load of nitrogen in my tissues. So this can be referred as the old nitrogen or the previous nitrogen. Now, on the second dive, we know I am going to intake nitrogen again. So I was absorbing on the first dive, eliminating on the surface interval, and now I'm going to intake to absorb more nitrogen into my tissues. So the new nitrogen is going to be 58 minutes, and the residual nitrogen is 25 minutes. I need to know what's the maximum load, what's the total load of nitrogen that I have within my tissue. So I'm going to add up the old nitrogen and the new nitrogen. So in this case, I'm going to have 6 and 2, 83 minutes. So the total load of nitrogen that I have in my tissues is 83 minutes. So now that I know the total load of nitrogen, this would be equivalent as if I was A, meaning that I haven't done yet any dives, and I'm going to start diving at 40 feet but for the maximum load of nitrogen, in this case the total time of 83 minutes. So I'm going to go back to the first side of the table and find 40 feet and then descend trying to find 83 minutes, which is the maximum load of nitrogen that we found before. So in this case, I don't have 83, I have 85. My pressure group is going to be S, so I'm going to put that pressure group right there. So that's a way in which you use the recreational dive planner to plan 2 dives to learn if you can stay that long, or what would be the pressure group at the end of the second dive, and this is going to be useful in the case you want to continue diving and you want to do a third dive. Right? You need to know the pressure group so you can plan accordingly to the group and the nitrogen that you have in your tissues. So now we have done 1 and 2 dives. What happens if between the dives you want to know what's the minimum time you have to wait before you do the second dive? This is called the minimum surface interval. So we're going to write for the profile 2 dives, right? And we're going to make one exercise trying to find out what's the minimum surface interval. So in this case, a diver is diving at 55 feet for 32 minutes in a beautiful wreck. He wants to go back to the same wreck because it was so beautiful. What would be the minimum time he has to stay at the surface if he wants to dive for 40 minutes on the second dive? Okay, so I'm going to put that information on the dive profile that I have here. So the wreck is at 55 feet on the bottom of the ocean. And he makes a first dive for 32 minutes, but then goes back to the surface and realizes he wants to go back because the wreck was impressive. So he wants to go back to the same place, so that would be again 55 feet. But now he wants to stay 40 minutes. And he wants to know, to follow this plan, what would be the minimum time he has to wait at the surface. So let's follow that information, that diving profile on the recreational dive planner. Okay, so we have 55, we don't have 55, we're going to move up, round up to 60. And 60, I'm going to descend at 60 feet for 32 minutes. I have 31 and 33. So my pressure group is going to be M at the end of the first dive. Okay? I do not have the information on the surface interval, but I know that this diver wants to go back to 55 feet and he wants to stay 40 minutes. So I'm going to use, instead of 55, because I do not have 55, I'm going to round up to 60, and I'm going to move to the right, trying to find on the blue box, where do I find 40 minutes? So right here I have 41 minutes, meaning that at the end of the surface interval, this diver should be C, letter C, if he wants to do 40 minutes at 55 feet. So now that I have those 2 pressure groups, I can go back to the surface interval side and I'm going to cross M, which was the pressure group at the end of the first dive, and C, which is the pressure group that diver needs to be able to complete the profile. So the minimum surface interval would be 1 hour and 5 minutes. And I can put that information right here. Okay, so that's another way of using, in which you can use the recreational dive planner to learn what's the minimum time you have to wait at the surface to make a second dive. To the same dive or a different depth. You can use any information, just put it on the profile and then you plan accordingly. So now let's do one more, which is what happens if a diver wants to do 3 dives. Okay, so now things are going to start getting more difficult because now we have more information and more pressure groups to find. Okay, so here is the question. A group of advanced divers want to make 3 dives. The first dive will be at 90 feet for 18 minutes. Then they will stay at the surface for 32 minutes. The second dive will be at 75 feet for 16 minutes. Then they will stay at the surface for 54 minutes. If they want to dive the third dive at 50 feet, what would be the maximum time they can stay underwater? So I'm going to put all the information here. So for the first dive, we have 90 feet and then 18 minutes as the bottom time. Then these divers will stay at the surface for 32 minutes. They want to do a second dive to 75 feet, and there they want to stay 16 minutes. Then they are planning to stay 54 minutes at the surface and want to do a third dive to 50 feet. The question is, what will be the maximum time that they can dive on the third dive? So let's just follow along the dive profile with the recreational dive plan. So the first dive is 90 feet, 18 minutes. So I'm going to find the 90 feet column here, right? And on these depths, I'm going to descend trying to find 18 minutes. So 15, 16, 17, 18 minutes. So the pressure group at the end of the first dive would be letter K. I'm going to write down that letter right there at the end of the first dive. Then, being letter K, they're going to stay at the surface 32 minutes. So here I have from 30 to 37. So the pressure group is going to be F at the end of the surface interval. Now they want to do a second dive, being group F, after the surface interval to 75 feet. So I don't have 75, I'm going to move to 80. And I'm going to cross 80 and F. And I have 2 numbers. I have 16 as the maximum time they can dive, and 14, which is the residual nitrogen time. So I have 16 and 14. Okay, so can they dive 16 minutes? Yes, that's the maximum time they can dive. But they still have 14 minutes of nitrogen within the tissue. So we need to add the 14 minutes of residual nitrogen time to find the total load of nitrogen these divers have at the end of the second dive, right? So once I know that, and it's going to be 30 minutes, will be the maximum, the total load of nitrogen they have at the end of the second dive. So I can go back to the first side of the table and find 75 feet for 30 minutes, which is the total load of nitrogen. So I don't have 75, I have 80, and I'm going to descend on 80, finding 30 minutes, and here it is. The new pressure group is letter R. Being letter R, they want to stay at the surface for 54 minutes. So I'm going to follow along this line, and I have here from 53 to 59 minutes. So the new pressure group is going to be letter G. Now they want to do a third dive. So we go to the second side of the table, and we have G at the end of the surface interval, and 50 would be the new depth. What's the maximum time allowed? Is 54 minutes. So the answer to this question is they can dive on the third dive for a maximum of 54 minutes. With that exercise, we have gotten to the end of this workshop. I hope it has been useful for you, and remember, we are doing these workshops to use the time efficiently during the lockdown. And if you have any questions on the courses, please go to our webpage, www.roatandiveacademy.com, and you will find all the information on the courses that we teach. You can also send us an email to gopro@roatandiveacademy.com, and I will try to answer any questions you may have. And remember, all these videos are going to be uploaded into our YouTube channel, so you can then watch them again, or you can download them if you want and share them with your friends. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.